Still taking the bus? My cousin mocked. My dad froze, staring at my wrist. That's a $2 million limited edition. I smiled and said, oh, this old thing? Can you imagine being worth over $1 billion, but your family still thinks you're a struggling pauper? My family thought they had me all figured out, the simple one, the struggling entrepreneur. They had no idea a $2 million secret was hiding right on my wrist, and tonight, it was about to blow up in their faces. What the hell happened next? My name's Audrey, I'm 28, and here's the thing, I run a multi-million-dollar tech company, but I still take the bus to work. My parents? They never quite got my whole simple living philosophy. Especially at our annual family dinner, where I'd show up in jeans while my cousins were dripping in designer everything. It was usually just a subtle nod of disapproval, but this time Blake, my cousin, couldn't resist. He actually mocked me, asking if I was still taking public transportation. Little did he know, a tiny flick of my wrist, a glimpse of this antique watch, would change absolutely everything. The look on my dad's face? That's where the story really begins. See, growing up as Thomas and Eleanor Hayes' daughter meant elite private schools, Hamptons vacations, every material advantage you could dream of. My dad built his real estate empire from scratch, pure grit and business savvy. My mom? Old money, her family name plastered on buildings across Manhattan. They gave me everything, but also drilled into me the importance of making my own way. And unlike my cousins, who were perfectly content to live off the family fortune, I was determined to build something meaningful on my terms. After graduating from Harvard Business School, I shocked everyone. I turned down a six-figure job offer at my father's company. Instead, I took an entry-level gig at a struggling tech startup. My dad was confused but supportive. My mom? Devastated. She was convinced I was throwing away my potential. And my cousins, especially Blake, just thought I'd lost my damn mind. You could be driving a Porsche by next year working for Uncle Thomas. Blake scoffed when I told him. Instead, you'll be making coffee for some nerds who'll probably go bankrupt in 6 months. I just smiled. There's more important things in life than driving a Porsche, Blake. He looked at me like I'd just spoken an alien language. But the startup? It was everything I'd hoped for. Fast-paced, innovative, full of brilliant minds creating something revolutionary. I thrived. I quickly became product manager within 18 months. And that's where I met Gerald Clean. He was 65, a veteran entrepreneur, our company advisor. Gerald became the mentor I desperately needed. My dad taught me business theory, but Gerald showed me how to apply it, especially in the crazy tech world. He was brilliant, kind, and completely unimpressed by status symbols. Despite his enormous wealth, he drove a 10-year-old Toyota, wore the same 3 sweaters, and lived in a modest home. Yet, he'd founded 3 unicorn startups and was revered throughout Silicon Valley. True wealth is invisible, Audrey, he told me once. The moment you need to show people how successful you are, you've already failed at understanding what success means. I absorbed his philosophy like a sponge. 2 years later, our startup got acquired by a tech giant. I used my buyout money to found my own company, Klein Dynamics, named in Gerald's honor. He was so touched. He became my first investor and board member. Those first 2 years were brutal. 18-hour days, living in a tiny studio apartment, pouring every single cent back into the company. I was developing a platform to help small businesses compete with corporate giants through data analysis and targeted marketing. The potential was enormous, but the early days were just filled with setbacks, failed pitches, and dwindling resources. Through it all, Gerald stood by me. When other investors got nervous, he stayed calm. When I doubted myself, he reminded me of my vision. And when I was ready to give up, he'd show up at my apartment with takeout, telling me stories about his own early failures. On my 27th birthday, after a particularly difficult but promising quarter, Gerald gave me a small box. This has been with me through 3 companies, 2 market crashes, and 1 very public failure, he said, his eyes twinkling. Now, it should be with you. Inside was his watch. Not flashy, not obviously expensive. Just elegant in its simplicity. I recognized it immediately from articles I'd read about him, a Gerald Clean original from a limited collection he designed before he was known for tech. I had no idea of its true value. Gerald, I can't accept this. I protested. This is worth more than my company. He just laughed. Right now, perhaps, but not for long. He fastened it around my wrist. Promise me you'll wear it when you need to remember your worth, not what others think you're worth. 3 months later, Gerald passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. I was devastated. That watch became my most treasured possession. Not for its monetary value, but because it connected me to him. I wore it every single day as I navigated the company through its insane growth phase without his guidance. In the years since his death, Klein Dynamics had exploded. We secured major clients, expanded to 3 international offices, and were featured in every major tech publication. I was named to the Forbes 30 under 30 list, and acquisition offers started pouring in. But through it all, I clung to Gerald's philosophy of understated success. I still lived in my modest apartment, though I'd upgraded to a 1-bedroom. I still took public transportation. And I still avoided the spotlight. My extended family? They remained largely oblivious to my success. They knew I'd started a company, but I never discussed its growth at family gatherings. I preferred to just listen to my cousins boast about their latest purchases. My parents respected my privacy, though my dad occasionally checked my company's public filings and seemed increasingly impressed. The annual Hayes family dinner was a tradition, started by my grandparents, continued by my dad and his brother, Uncle Richard. It was always at my parents' estate in Connecticut, this sprawling mansion that's been featured in architectural magazines. Every year, the entire extended family gathered to eat, drink, and inevitably, compare achievements and acquisitions. Uncle Richard was my dad's younger brother, and there'd always been this competitive tension between them. My dad built his fortune through hard work. Uncle Richard? He married into wealth and parlayed his connections into a senior position at a prestigious financial firm. Their children, my cousins, reflected their values. Led by Blake, they measured success by the brands they wore and the cars they drove. Family dinners inevitably became showcases for their latest status symbols. As I got ready for this year's dinner, I thought about Gerald and what he'd say about my anxiety. I could almost hear his gentle laugh, his calm voice. Let them have their Porsches, Audrey. You're building something that will last. With that thought, I dressed in my usual style, dark jeans, a simple white blouse, minimal makeup, and Gerald's watch. I called an Uber and headed to Connecticut, ready to endure another evening of subtle, and not so subtle, judgment. The Uber driver actually whistled when we pulled through the ornate iron gates. Nice place, he said. I just nodded, watching the familiar Georgian mansion glow in the evening light. I always felt this strange mix of emotions coming home, pride in what my parents had built, nostalgia for my childhood, and a slight discomfort with the sheer ostentation. You can drop me at the front, I told the driver. A row of luxury vehicles was already parked prominently. Blake's new Ferrari, angled so no one could miss it. Uncle Richard's Bentley, my cousin Amber's Range Rover. My Uber, a practical Toyota Camry, looked distinctly out of place. I caught Blake watching from a window, no doubt noting my transportation choice with smug satisfaction. The massive front door opened before I could ring, revealing Santos, my parents' longtime butler. His formal demeanor softened into a genuine smile. Miss Audrey, welcome home. Thanks, Santos. How are Maria and the kids? Very well, thank you. Diego started college this fall, first in the family. That's wonderful, I genuinely said. I'd helped Santos' son with his application essays last year. Columbia, right? Computer science. Yes. He speaks of you often. Your encouragement meant everything. I squeezed his arm gently before moving into the soaring entry hall. My mother spotted me first. Eleanor Hayes, striking in her early 60s, elegant in a navy designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her hair perfectly styled, her posture impeccable. She air-kissed both my cheeks. Audrey, darling. You could have worn the Chanel dress I sent you for your birthday. It would have been perfect for tonight. This is more comfortable, Mom, I said, giving her a real hug, which she returned somewhat stiffly. You look beautiful as always. She sighed, but smiled. Well, at least that blouse is silk. Come say hello to everyone. Your cousin Blake just closed a major account at the firm. Of course he had. Blake's achievements were always highlighted immediately. Mine? Rarely mentioned. I followed her into the salon, a grand room with soaring ceilings, antique furniture, and walls lined with priceless art. About 20 family members were there, champagne flutes in hand. My father was near the fireplace, talking with Uncle Richard, but he looked up when I entered. Thomas Hayes was tall, distinguished, his dark hair now mostly gray. Unlike my mother, who wholeheartedly embraced wealth's trappings, my father maintained a certain restraint. Yes, he drove luxury cars and owned multiple homes. But there was always something slightly uncomfortable about him at these formal gatherings, as though he hadn't quite forgotten his middle-class origins. There's my girl, he said, breaking away from his brother to embrace me properly. His hug was warm, genuine, smelling of the cologne he'd worn my whole childhood. How was the drive up? Fine, Dad. No traffic. He nodded, studying my face closely. You look tired. Working too hard? Probably, I admit it. But things are going well. Glad to hear it. He lowered his voice. Your latest quarterly filing was impressive. That contract with Johnson and Williams was quite a coup. I blinked in surprise. You saw that. He smiled slightly. I keep tabs on you, even if you think I don't. He squeezed my shoulder. I'm proud of you, Audrey. Building something on your own terms. Before I could respond, Uncle Richard approached, cocktail in hand. Audrey, there you are. We were beginning to think you'd forgotten about us successful folks. His laugh was just a little too loud, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Hello, Uncle Richard, I said, accepting his brief, stiff hug. How are things at Westfield Financial? Booming. Absolutely booming. We just acquired a boutique firm in Boston. Added $2 billion to our portfolio management. He took a large sip of his drink. But enough about me. How's your little startup doing? Still afloat? My father frowned slightly at his brother's condescending tone, but I just smiled. We're managing. Thanks for asking. Good. Good. Persistence is important. He patted my arm patronizingly. Blake is around here somewhere. He was made junior partner last month, youngest in the firm's history. That's wonderful, I said with all the enthusiasm I could muster. I'll be sure to congratulate him. As if summoned, Blake appeared at his father's side. My cousin was 32, conventionally handsome in that way of men who spend too much time at exclusive gyms and high-end barbershops. His suit was bespoke, his watch ostentatiously diamond-encrusted. "Cousin Audrey," he said, air-kissing near my cheek. Love the simple look. Very authentic. "Blake," I responded with a nod. "Congratulations on making junior partner." He straightened his already straight tie. "Thanks. The Ferrari outside is my celebration present to myself. 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. Impressive, I said, though I couldn't have cared less. Gerald's watch felt suddenly heavy on my wrist, a quiet, powerful reminder of what truly mattered. My cousin Amber approached next, her high heels clicking on the marble floor. "Audrey, oh my God, it's been forever." She embraced me with the excessive enthusiasm of someone who'd already had several glasses of champagne. "I love what you've done with your hair. So natural." Amber was Blake's younger sister, 26, and already on her second husband. She nominally worked in public relations, though her job seemed to primarily involve attending charity galas and posting about them on social media. "Thanks, Amber. You look well." "Just back from Capri," she said, flipping her expensively highlighted hair. "Alessandro has a villa there. You should see it. 6 bedrooms, infinity pool, private beach access." She leaned closer. "We're thinking of buying our own place nearby. Nothing too extravagant, just a little €3 million hideaway." I nodded politely as she continued to detail the amenities of Italian luxury real estate. Over her shoulder, I could see my other cousins engaged in similar conversations. Justin was showing off his new Rolex to his sister Madison, who was scrolling through photos of her recent Maldives vacation. And Pamela was describing her newly renovated Hamptons house to my mother, emphasizing the difficulty of finding reliable contractors who understood the importance of imported Italian marble. The entire room hummed with these exchanges of acquisition and achievement, a familiar symphony of competitive wealth. I stood in the midst of it, Gerald's watch on my wrist, thinking about the conference call I had scheduled the next morning with a nonprofit that wanted to use our platform to connect homeless individuals with employment opportunities. The contrast between these worlds made me feel like I was straddling parallel universes. A staff member announced that dinner was served, a welcome interruption. As we moved toward the formal dining room, my father fell into step beside me. "You're quiet tonight," he observed. "Just tired," I replied. "End of quarter is always busy." He nodded, then added quietly, "I read about your housing initiative in the Times business section, providing your platform to affordable housing advocates pro bono. That was good of you." I looked at him, surprised. He rarely mentioned specific aspects of my business. "It seemed like the right thing to do," I said simply. Something like approval flickered in his eyes. "Your grandfather would have done the same. He never forgot where he came from." He paused. "Neither have I, despite what Richard might think." Before I could respond, we entered the dining room. A table set for 24 gleamed with crystal, silver, and fine china. Name cards indicated our seating arrangements, and I was unsurprised to find myself placed between Blake and Madison. Another family dinner had officially begun. The first course arrived, seared scallops with a citrus reduction. Wine glasses were filled, and the performance began. These dinners always followed the same script. Accomplishments casually mentioned. Acquisitions subtly highlighted. Status established and reinforced. "Madison, that necklace is stunning," Aunt Pamela said to my cousin. "Is it new?" Madison touched the diamond pendant at her throat. "Oh, this?" "Yes." Thomas surprised me after he closed the Peterson merger. 12-carat cushion cut. "We had it custom designed by that jeweler in the city, the one who does all the work for celebrities." "How thoughtful," my mother commented. "Speaking of mergers, Richard, I heard Westfield is looking at that firm in Chicago." Uncle Richard dabbed his mouth with his napkin. "Yes, negotiations are in the final stages. Blake has been instrumental in the due diligence process." All eyes turned to Blake, who adopted a modest, rehearsed expression. "Just doing my job, but the acquisition will add about 30% to our annual revenue. We're looking at expanding our Pacific Rim presence next." "Blake has always had a good head for business," Uncle Richard continued. "He gets that from me, of course." My father raised an eyebrow but said nothing, taking a sip of his wine instead. I knew he was thinking about how Uncle Richard had nearly bankrupted his first investment firm before marrying into the Westfield family and being installed in a senior position at his father-in-law's company. "And Justin, dear, how's the new position at Goldman?" my mother asked, turning the spotlight to another cousin. Justin straightened his tie importantly. "Challenging, but rewarding. We just closed a $4 billion deal with a Saudi investment group. I'll be flying to Riyadh next month on the company jet." The conversation continued as the second course arrived. Roasted beet salad with goat cheese. I ate quietly, responding to direct questions, but otherwise remaining on the periphery. Blake, however, seemed determined to draw me in. "So, Audrey," he said, swirling his expensive Bordeaux. "How is the entrepreneurial life treating you?" "Still working out of that co-working space downtown. We actually moved to our own offices last year," I replied. "In the Flatiron District." "Oh. Must be expensive. Those rents are outrageous." I nodded noncommittally. "It works for us." "And how many employees do you have now?" he pressed. "Still just you and those 2 programmers?" "We've grown a bit," I said, deadpan. Blake exchanged a knowing look with his father. "Well, startups are always a gamble. 90% fail within the first year, you know." The fact that you've lasted this long is actually quite impressive. Thank you for the vote of confidence, I said dryly. Aunt Pamela leaned forward, her expression one of practiced concern. Darling, you know if you ever need help, the family is here for you. There's no shame in admitting when it's time to try something else. I'm sure your father could find a suitable position for you at Hayes Development. I felt a flash of irritation but kept my expression neutral. That's very kind, Aunt Pamela. But we're doing fine. Of course, dear, she said, patting my hand in a way that suggested she didn't believe me. I just worry. A young woman should be thinking about stability, building a future. Look at Madison. She and Thomas just purchased that lovely brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. Madison beamed. The renovation is costing a fortune, but it will be worth it. We're putting in a wine cellar and a home theater. You should come see it when it's finished, Audrey. Maybe it will inspire you. I smiled tightly. That sounds nice. You know, Uncle Roger chimed in from further down the table. Entrepreneurship is all well and good, but there's something to be said for the security of an established firm. My college roommate tried the startup route. Bright fellow, had what seemed like a good idea. Sank every penny he had into it. Now he manages a branch of Bank of America in New Jersey. Several family members nodded sagely at this cautionary tale. I remember when you first announced you were starting your own company, Blake said, cutting into his perfectly cooked salmon as the main course was served. What was it again? Some kind of data analysis for small businesses. That's right, I confirmed, taking a bite of my own meal. Seems like a limited market, he observed. Small businesses don't usually have much budget for that sort of thing. Now, if you were targeting enterprise clients, he trailed off, shaking his head slightly. We have a mixed client base, I said simply. Blake wasn't deterred. I just wonder about the viability long term, especially in this economy. Venture capital has dried up considerably since the interest rates went up. I thought about the $20 million in funding we'd secured last quarter and the offers from 3 major VC firms that I was currently considering. We manage. My father cleared his throat. Audrey's company is doing quite well, actually. I've been impressed with their growth metrics. Blake looked surprised, then quickly recovered. Well, good for her. It's important to follow your passion, even if it means certain lifestyle adjustments. Madison picked up on his tone immediately. Yes, I admire your commitment to simplicity, Audrey. It must be so grounding to live like regular people. I caught my father watching me, something unreadable in his expression. My mother looked uncomfortable, clearly torn between defending her daughter and avoiding any hint of family discord at her meticulously planned dinner. There's dignity in living within one's means, I replied evenly. Something Gerald always emphasized. Gerald. Uncle Richard asked. Gerald Clean, I explained. He was my mentor. He passed away last year. Oh, the tech guy, Blake said dismissively. I read about him. Made a fortune in software or something, right? Lived like a pauper. Despite being worth billions. Kind of eccentric. I felt a surge of anger at hearing Gerald described this way, but I kept my composure. He believed that wealth should be measured by impact, not possessions. Blake snorted. Easy to say when you have billions in the bank. I bet he still flew private and had houses all over the world. Actually, he flew commercial and owned one modest home in Palo Alto, I corrected. He put most of his money into his foundation for educational access. Well, to each their own, Blake said with a shrug. But there's nothing wrong with enjoying the fruits of your labor. Life is short. What's the point of success if you can't show it off a little? As the conversation shifted to Madison's upcoming trip to Paris, I felt the comforting weight of Gerald's watch on my wrist. I thought about his quiet confidence, his genuine interest in people regardless of their status. His belief that true success was measured by the lives you improved, not the possessions you accumulated. The contrast between his values and those being expressed around this table couldn't have been starker. My reverie was interrupted by my cousin Amber, who was describing her new Mercedes in loving detail. The interior is completely customized. Took 3 months to get exactly right. But when you're driving through the Hamptons, it's worth it to make the right impression. Blake nodded in agreement. Image is everything in our world. The right car, the right address, the right connections. It all signals your place in the hierarchy. He turned to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Speaking of which, Audrey, I noticed you arrived by Uber today. Still taking the bus around the city too? The table fell momentarily silent. All eyes turned toward me. The question hung in the air, its condescension unmistakable. I saw my mother's embarrassed expression. My aunt's poorly concealed pity. My uncle's smug satisfaction at his son's pointed query. But it was my father's reaction that surprised me. His attention had shifted from Blake's face to my wrist, where Gerald's watch was partially visible beneath the cuff of my blouse. His eyes widened slightly, his fork pausing halfway to his mouth. He was staring at the watch with an expression of stunned recognition. Blake, completely misinterpreting my father's reaction as embarrassment on my behalf, pressed his advantage. I mean, there's frugality and then there's unnecessary suffering. Public transportation in New York can be so unpredictable, not to mention the types of people you encounter. I opened my mouth to respond, but at that moment, my father found his voice. Is that what I think it is? My father asked, his voice cutting through Blake's commentary. He was still staring at my wrist with an intensity that drew everyone's attention. I glanced down at Gerald's watch, suddenly self-conscious. What do you mean? Your watch, he said, setting down his fork deliberately. May I see it? The table had gone utterly silent. Blake looked utterly confused by this unexpected interruption of his moment of triumph. I hesitated, then extended my arm across the table. My father leaned forward, examining the timepiece with growing amazement. "This is a Gerald Clean original," he said quietly. "From his limited first collection." Uncle Richard frowned. "The tech entrepreneur who died last year? He made watches. Before he entered the tech world," my father explained, still studying my watch. "He was a horologist first. Created a small collection of handcrafted timepieces before founding his first company. Only 50 were ever made." He looked up at me, his expression a mix of shock and newfound respect. "How did you come to possess this?" All eyes were now on me. The dynamics of the table had completely shifted. Blake's earlier mockery hung awkwardly in the air. "Gerald gave it to me," I said simply. "Before he died. He was my mentor and an early investor in my company." My father sat back in his chair. "Do you have any idea what this is worth?" I nodded. "I know it's valuable, but that's not why I wear it." "That," my father said, addressing the entire table now, his voice full of awe, "is a $2 million watch. Possibly more, given its provenance and the fact that Clean's death has made his collection even more sought after." A collective gasp went around the table. Blake's mouth literally fell open. Madison dropped her fork with a clatter. Aunt Pamela started coughing on her wine. "Oh, this old thing?" I said with a casual shrug, pulling my sleeve back slightly to better display the watch. "I wear it every day." Gerald insisted that beautiful things should be used, not stored away. My father was shaking his head in amazement. "The craftsmanship is extraordinary. Each one was entirely handmade by Clean himself. The movement is based on a revolutionary design of his own creation. Collectors have been searching for these for years. Most are in private collections or museums." Uncle Richard was staring at the watch with new, hungry interest. $2 million on your wrist? You should have that insured, Audrey." "It is," I assured him. "Gerald took care of that. When he gave it to me, he said it was the first thing he ever created that truly mattered to him." Blake had recovered enough to join the conversation, his tone completely transformed. "I had no idea you were close to Gerald Clean. He was a legend in the industry." "He was more than that," I said quietly. "He was a friend. He believed in what I was building when few others did." "Which was what, exactly?" Uncle Richard asked, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by genuine curiosity. "You've always been rather vague about your company." I took a sip of water, considering how much to reveal. Gerald had always advised strategic transparency. Perhaps it was time. "We developed a proprietary algorithm that helps businesses optimize their operations through predictive analytics," I explained. "We started with small businesses because they were underserved in this space, but we've expanded significantly. We now work with several Fortune 500 companies, 3 major healthcare systems, and the federal government." My mother blinked in surprise. "The federal government? You never mentioned that." "The contract was finalized last month," I said. "We'll be implementing our platform across multiple agencies over the next year. It's our largest deal to date." "How large?" Blake asked, unable to contain himself. I met his gaze directly. $900 million over 5 years. Another stunned silence fell over the table. My father was looking at me with open pride now. My mother appeared completely bewildered. "But you still live in that tiny apartment in the city," she said, confusion evident in her voice. "And you take the bus?" I smiled. "I like my apartment. It's close to our offices, and I can walk to my favorite coffee shop. As for public transportation, it's efficient and better for the environment." "Gerald took the bus every day of his life, even after he became a billionaire," my father murmured, looking at me with new understanding. A true Clean disciple. Blake was struggling. You could see it on his face, struggling to reconcile this new information with his previous perception of me. "So, your company? It's successful then?" I nodded. "Very. We're currently valued at $1.8 billion after our last funding round. I maintain majority ownership." Uncle Richard choked on his drink. Aunt Pamela's eyes widened to an almost comical degree. Madison was furiously typing something into her phone, probably searching for information about my company. "You're a billionaire?" Blake asked incredulously. "On paper, potentially," I clarified. "Most of my net worth is tied to the company's valuation. I take a reasonable salary and live accordingly." "But why keep it a secret?" Amber asked, genuinely perplexed. "If I had that kind of success, everyone would know about it." I thought about Gerald and his quiet confidence, his disinterest in impressing others. Because true success isn't measured by what others think of you, but by the impact you create and the problems you solve. Our platform has helped thousands of small businesses survive and thrive. It has optimized healthcare delivery in underserved communities. That matters more than the valuation. My father was nodding slowly. Clean's philosophy. Focus on the work, not the rewards. I always admired that about him. Blake seemed utterly unable to process this revelation. His entire worldview, which placed me firmly at the bottom of the family hierarchy, had been upended in the span of minutes. "But the clothes you wear, the way you live, are choices. Just as your choices reflect your values," I finished for him, my voice calm but firm. "Gerald taught me that we reveal our true selves not through what we say, but through what we prioritize." The dinner continued, but the dynamic had fundamentally changed. Family members who had barely acknowledged me earlier were now finding reasons to engage me in conversation. Questions about my company, about Gerald, about my plans for the future came from all directions. Through it all, I maintained the same calm demeanor, neither gloating over the shift nor playing into their suddenly heightened interest. As the dessert course was being served, Blake leaned toward me, his voice low enough that others couldn't hear. I owe you an apology, Audrey. I've been condescending and rude. I assumed that because you didn't flaunt your success, you had none to flaunt. I studied him for a moment, seeing past the expensive suit and practiced charm to the insecurity beneath. Success means different things to different people, Blake. I don't judge your choices. I would appreciate the same courtesy. He nodded, looking somewhat chastened. The watch really is extraordinary. Clean must have thought very highly of you. I touched the timepiece gently. It reminds me every day of what matters. Not its value, but what it represents. Craftsmanship, integrity, creating something meaningful that lasts. As I said these words, I caught my father watching me from across the table. A thoughtful expression on his face. For perhaps the first time, he was seeing me, not as his little girl who needed protection or acceptance, but as a woman who had forged her own path and found success on her own terms. In that moment of recognition, I felt something shift between us. A new foundation of mutual respect taking shape. The watch that had once been Gerald's silent companion was now telling my story, revealing truths I had kept hidden, not out of shame, but out of a desire to be valued for who I was rather than what I owned. As the evening progressed, I found myself grateful for its quiet presence on my wrist, a tangible connection to the mentor who had shaped not just my business philosophy, but my approach to life itself. As the dinner plates were cleared and coffee was served, the conversation inevitably circled back to my watch and its previous owner. Uncle Richard, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally voiced what many were clearly thinking. I still can't wrap my head around the fact that Gerald Clean was your mentor, he said, stirring cream into his coffee. He was notoriously selective about his time and investments. He paused, looking directly at me. How exactly did that relationship develop? All eyes turned to me once again. Even the staff paused, sensing that something significant was unfolding. My father leaned forward slightly, clearly interested in hearing the full story himself. I met Gerald at Innovate Tech, the startup where I worked after graduation, I began. He was brought in as an advisor during a particularly difficult quarter. The company was burning through cash and our product development had stalled. I remember that company, Blake interjected. They were acquired by Google eventually, right? I nodded. For $300 million. But at the time, we were on the verge of collapse. Gerald came in and completely transformed our approach. He had this ability to cut through complexity and identify the core value proposition. That was his genius. My father agreed. I heard him speak at a conference once. Remarkable clarity of thought. He noticed that I asked different questions than everyone else in the room. I continued. After one particularly contentious meeting, he asked me to walk with him to get coffee. We ended up talking for 3 hours. By the end of that conversation, he had offered to mentor me. Just like that. Uncle Richard asked skeptically. Gerald made decisions quickly when he saw potential, I explained. He told me later that he recognized something in me that reminded him of himself at my age. A certain way of looking at problems. My mother, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. And he invested in your company when you started it? He was my first investor, I confirmed. $500,000 on a handshake. No formal pitch, no detailed business plan. He said he was investing in me, not just the idea. That's not how business typically works, Uncle Richard pointed out, unable to hide his disapproval of such unorthodox methods. I smiled. Gerald wasn't typical. He believed that the best innovations come from trust and freedom, not rigid structures and endless documentation. He gave me that initial funding and told me to build something meaningful. His only conditions were that I maintain control of the company and that I use a portion of any profits to help others. The foundation you established last year, my father said, nodding with understanding. The one focused on tech education in underserved communities. That was part of your agreement with Clean. Yes, I acknowledged, surprised that he knew about it, though I would have done it anyway. Gerald showed me that success creates responsibility. Madison, who had been researching on her phone throughout this exchange, looked up with wide eyes. According to Forbes, Klein Dynamics is projected to reach $3 billion in valuation by next quarter. There are rumors of an IPO. She stared at me. You named your company after him. It seemed appropriate, I said simply. His philosophy is the foundation of everything we do. But why keep all of this so private? Aunt Pamela asked, gesturing vaguely toward my modest attire. You could be living in a penthouse, driving luxury cars, enjoying the best of everything. I considered how to explain a mindset so different from the one that dominated this table. When Gerald gave me this watch, he told me something I'll never forget. He said, the moment you feel the need to prove your worth to others is the moment you have forgotten what you are truly worth. I don't need to display my success to validate it. My father was nodding slowly, a new appreciation in his eyes. Clean always understood that true power lies in knowing your value without needing external validation. It's why he was respected even by his competitors. Exactly, I agreed. And he lived that philosophy every day. The most valuable lessons he taught me had nothing to do with business strategy or technology. They were about integrity, purpose, and the responsibility that comes with success. Blake, who had been unusually subdued, finally spoke up. So the watch, it must have incredible sentimental value beyond its price. It is priceless to me, I confirmed. Gerald wore it while building $3 billion companies. He said it kept him grounded, reminded him of the craftsmanship and patience required to create something of lasting value. And now you wear it while building your own empire, my father observed with a small smile. I shook my head. Not an empire. A solution. Our platform helps businesses operate more efficiently, which saves jobs, reduces waste, and improves working conditions. The valuation is just a byproduct, not the goal. Uncle Richard looked skeptical, but my father was nodding with growing understanding. I could see a shift in how he was looking at me, a new respect mingled with something that might have been regret for not having seen this side of me sooner. The federal contract you mentioned, he said, that was the one announced last month to modernize agency operations and reduce governmental waste? Yes, I confirmed. We beat out several major tech firms for the bid. Our solution will save taxpayers an estimated $12 billion over 10 years while improving service delivery. That was your company? Uncle Richard exclaimed. It was all over the financial news. They never mentioned you by name. I prefer to keep a low profile, I explained. Our work speaks for itself. But surely now, with this level of success, you'll upgrade your lifestyle? Aunt Pamela pressed, still seemingly unable to comprehend my choices. Perhaps a nicer apartment at least? I smiled politely. I like where I live. It's convenient and has everything I need. Gerald lived in the same modest house for 30 years, even as his net worth grew to billions. He taught me that excess consumption rarely correlates with increased happiness. So, you just work all the time? Madison asked, her tone suggesting she found the concept depressing. I work on things that matter to me, I clarified. But I also travel extensively, volunteer, and spend time with friends who value me for who I am, not what I own. My life is very full. And the foundation? My father asked. Tell us more about that. I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. This was something I was truly proud of. The Clean Foundation for Technological Equity. We provide comprehensive tech education and mentorship to students from under-resourced communities, full scholarships, equipment, internships, and ongoing support. Our first cohort of 50 students is halfway through the program. They are extraordinary. 50 students? Uncle Richard said. That seems modest for someone of your means. We're just getting started, I explained. The program is intensive and personalized. We want to refine our approach before expanding, but our 10-year plan is to reach 10,000 students annually across the country. 10,000 lives changed, my father mused. That is a significant legacy. More significant than any possession could be. I agreed. Gerald understood that his greatest pride wasn't in the companies he built, but in the people he helped develop, the opportunities he created. As coffee concluded and the family began to move toward the library for after-dinner drinks, I noticed a distinct change in how people were interacting with me. There was a new deference in their manner, a recalibration of my position within the family hierarchy. It was exactly what I had always wanted to avoid, being valued for my bank account rather than my character. Blake sidled up to me as we walked through the hallway lined with family portraits. I feel like I need to completely reassess everything I thought I knew about you, he admitted. All this time, I was pitying you, thinking you couldn't afford the lifestyle the rest of us enjoy. And it turns out you could buy and sell most of us several times over. I stopped and turned to face him directly. That's exactly why I don't discuss my company's valuation or my personal finances, Blake. I don't want to be treated differently based on my net worth. It's the least interesting thing about me. He looked genuinely perplexed. But isn't that what we all want? Recognition of our success, acknowledgement of our achievements. I get all the recognition I need from seeing our platform make a difference for the businesses that use it, I told him. From watching our foundation students thrive. From knowing that Gerald would be proud of what I've built. Blake glanced down at my watch, then back at my face. I think I have a lot to learn from you, Audrey. For the first time that evening, his words seemed completely sincere. The family had migrated to the library, a wood-paneled room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather armchairs, and a well-stocked bar. Conversations had splintered into smaller groups, though I noticed I was now being included in discussions that would have previously excluded me. Uncle Richard was suddenly interested in my thoughts on market trends. Aunt Pamela wanted to introduce me to her friend who ran a charitable foundation. Even Justin, who had barely acknowledged my existence at previous gatherings, was asking about potential investment opportunities. I accepted a glass of whiskey and found a quiet corner, needing a moment to process the evening shift. I was the same person I had been when I arrived by Uber hours earlier. Yet, I was now being treated entirely differently. Quite a performance, my father said, appearing beside me with his own drink in hand. Mind if I join you? I gestured to the empty chair next to mine. Please do. He settled in, taking a thoughtful sip of his scotch. You know, I always respected your desire for privacy, for making your own way. But I had no idea you were keeping quite this much under wraps. Would it have made a difference if you had known? I asked. He considered this for a moment. I've always been proud of you, Audrey. But I might have run interference with the rest of the family a bit more effectively. Spared you some of the condescension. I can handle condescension, I assured him. It's the sudden shift in treatment now that they know about the company valuation that bothers me more. My father nodded, understanding immediately. The curse of wealth. People see the money, not the person. It's why I've always been suspicious of new friends who appear after business deals are announced. Gerald had the same problem, I said. He told me once that he could count on one hand the number of people who truly knew him, not his net worth. He sounds like a remarkable mentor. My father swirled his drink thoughtfully. I wish I had taken the time to know him better. We met at conferences occasionally, but never had a real conversation. You would have liked him, I said. He was brilliant, but unpretentious, completely authentic. Like his protege, my father observed with a small smile. You know, watching you tonight, I saw so much of myself at your age. The determination to build something meaningful, to be judged on merit rather than background. This surprised me. My father had always seemed comfortable with his wealth, with the privilege it afforded. Really? But you embrace all of this. I gestured around at the opulent room. He chuckled. Your mother embraces it. I tolerate it because it makes her happy. But between us, I would be perfectly content in a place a quarter this size. He leaned closer. Why do you think I spend so much time at the office or the fishing cabin in Vermont? All this, he waved his hand. It was never what motivated me. I had no idea, I admitted. We have that in common, it seems. The ability to keep our true selves somewhat hidden. He took another sip of his drink. Though perhaps we have both been too good at it. I should have seen what you were building. Should have recognized your achievement sooner. You saw enough, I assured him. You checked those quarterly filings, apparently. He smiled. Professional curiosity at first, then genuine admiration as I realized what you were accomplishing. But I respected your privacy, your desire to stand on your own merits. I didn't want to intrude. I appreciated that, I said, honestly. It meant everything to build this on my own terms. My father's expression grew serious. The watch, it really was Clean's personal timepiece? I nodded, extending my wrist so he could see it again in the warm light of the library. He gave it to me on my 27th birthday. Said it had been with him through everything and now it should be with me. My father studied it with expert eyes. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. I had heard rumors about his collection, but few have ever been photographed or documented. Most were given to close friends or family, never sold. He made this one himself, from scratch, I told him. Spent 2 years perfecting the movement while launching his first tech company. He said it taught him patience and precision, values that served him well. My father looked from the watch to me. And now they serve you. Our conversation was interrupted as Blake approached, his demeanor noticeably humbler than earlier in the evening. Excuse me, Uncle Thomas. Could I borrow Audrey for a moment? My father looked to me. I nodded, and he stood. Of course. I should check on your mother anyway. She's probably already planning how to redecorate your childhood bedroom now that she knows you can afford priceless art. He winked at me before walking away. Blake took the vacated seat, his usual confidence subdued. I wanted to apologize properly, Audrey. My behavior tonight, and frankly at every family gathering for years, has been inexcusable. I studied him, trying to determine his sincerity. Apology accepted. But I'm curious, what exactly are you apologizing for? He looked taken aback. For treating you like you're less successful, less accomplished than me. For the comments about the bus, your lifestyle choices, all of it. And if my company was worth $10,000 instead of nearly $2 billion, would you still be apologizing? I asked mildly. Blake had the grace to look embarrassed. That's a fair question. It's the only question that matters, I pointed out. Because if you're only sorry because you discovered I'm wealthier than you imagined, then you've missed the entire point. He was quiet for a moment, genuinely reflecting on my words. You're right, he finally admitted. I've been measuring success, measuring people, by all the wrong metrics. It's how I was raised, but that's no excuse. It's never too late to reevaluate your values, I told him, my tone softening. Gerald was 40 before he had his epiphany about wealth and status. It completely transformed his approach to life and business. I'd like to hear more about him sometime, Blake said. About his philosophy. If you'd be willing to share. I'd like that, I said, somewhat surprised by his genuine interest. As Blake excused himself, my mother approached, looking slightly flustered. Audrey, darling, I feel absolutely terrible about all the little comments I've made over the years about your apartment, your clothes, your lifestyle choices. She sat down beside me, taking my hands in hers. Mom, I interrupted gently, that's exactly why I didn't tell you. I wanted you to accept my choices for what they were, not because they came with a certain valuation. She looked confused. But surely you understand that we only want what's best for you? To see you living beneath your means when you could have everything you want, this is what I want, I assured her. A meaningful business that solves real problems. A foundation that creates opportunities for deserving students. A life focused on purpose rather than possessions. But you could have both, she insisted. Purpose and beautiful things. I touched Gerald's watch. I have both. This is the most beautiful thing I own, and I cherish it, not for its market value, but for what it represents. The same is true of my company, my foundation, my relationships. My mother sighed, clearly still struggling to understand. Well, at the very least, you must let me help you find a nicer apartment. Something befitting your position. I couldn't help but laugh. Some things never change. I love you, Mom, just as you are, even when you're trying to redecorate my life. She smiled reluctantly. And I love you even when you're stubbornly rejecting perfectly good Chanel dresses. As the evening wound down, I found myself engaged in more genuine conversations than I had experienced at any previous family gathering. Some relatives were clearly still processing the revelation of my success, adjusting their perception of me. Others seemed to be reconsidering their own definitions of achievement. And a few, like my father, were connecting with me on a deeper level, seeing beyond both my deliberate modesty and the company valuation to the person I had become. When it came time to leave, I ordered another Uber, declining offers from several relatives to drive me to the city. My father walked me to the door while we waited for the car to arrive. "You've given them all something to think about tonight," he observed. Myself included. "That was never my intention," I said. "I just wanted to be treated like a person, not a bank account, positive or negative." He nodded thoughtfully. Gerald Clean's greatest legacy may not be his companies, or even his watches, but what he taught you about the true meaning of success. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'd like to see your office sometime. Meet your team. Learn more about what you're building." "I'd like that," I said, genuinely pleased by the suggestion. "How about next week? I could give you the tour, introduce you to everyone." "It's a date," he agreed, just as my Uber pulled up. "And Audrey, keep wearing that watch. It's exactly where it belongs." As I settled into the back seat of the car, I glanced down at Gerald's timepiece, thinking about how objects, like people, contain multitudes. To most of my family, the watch had transformed me from a struggling entrepreneur to a serious player in a single moment of recognition. But to me, it remained what it had always been, a connection to a mentor who had shown me that the truest measure of success was not what you accumulated, but what you contributed. 3 weeks after that revelatory family dinner, I found myself sitting in my office overlooking Madison Avenue. The space was modern but understated, with glass walls, clean lines, and functional furniture. No expensive art adorned the walls, just enlarged photographs of our team members working with clients, visual reminders of the real people impacted by our technology. The visit from my father had gone better than I could have hoped. He had arrived early, taken the full tour, met with my executive team, and asked thoughtful questions about our technology and business model. I had watched with pride as he engaged with our developers, showing genuine interest in their work and vision. By the end of the day, he was exchanging contact information with our CTO, making plans to introduce him to potential partners. "You've built something remarkable here," he had told me as we stood looking out over the city from our rooftop deck. "Not just the technology or the business, but the culture. These people believe in what they are doing." "That was always the goal," I had replied. "To create something meaningful. Something that matters." Now, as I reviewed the final plans for our foundation's new headquarters, I reflected on how much had changed since that dinner. Not in my day-to-day life, which remained largely the same, but in my relationships with my family. My father and I spoke several times a week now, discussing business strategy, foundation initiatives, and occasionally, the finer points of watch collecting, a shared interest we had discovered. My mother had finally accepted that I would not be moving to a penthouse anytime soon, though she had managed to slip a few designer pieces into my wardrobe just for special occasions. Most surprising was the evolution in my relationship with Blake. True to his word, he had reached out to learn more about Gerald's philosophy. We had met for coffee several times, and I had been impressed by his genuine desire to reconsider his priorities. He had even begun volunteering with a local youth coding program, discovering a talent for teaching that surprised us both. The larger family dynamic had shifted as well. At a cousin's birthday celebration the previous weekend, I had noticed less emphasis on material acquisitions and more substantial conversations. Whether this change would last remained to be seen, but it was a promising start. My assistant knocked lightly on my door, interrupting my thoughts. "Your 2 o'clock is here. The high school student you mentioned." "Send her in," I said, standing to greet my visitor. Zoe entered my office nervously, a 16-year-old with bright eyes and a determined set to her shoulders. She had applied to our foundation's mentorship program with an impressive proposal for using data analytics to address food insecurity in urban neighborhoods. "Miss Hayes," she said, extending her hand formally. "Thank you so much for meeting with me." "Audrey, please," I corrected, gently gesturing for her to take a seat. "I was impressed by your application, Zoe. Your approach to mapping food deserts using multiple data points was innovative." She brightened visibly at the praise. "My family relies on food assistance programs, so I know firsthand how challenging access can be. I want to create solutions, not just identify problems." As she outlined her ideas, I was struck by her passion and clarity of purpose. She reminded me of myself at that age, though she faced economic barriers I had never experienced. This was exactly the kind of student Gerald had wanted to support, someone with a vision and drive to create meaningful change. "How would you feel about being the first participant in our new direct mentorship program?" I asked when she finished her presentation. "You would work directly with our data science team 1 afternoon a week, developing your project with professional guidance. There's a stipend involved, of course." Her eyes widened. "Are you serious?" That would change everything for me." "Completely serious," I assured her. "Your idea has real potential. With the right support and resources, it could help thousands of families." As we discussed the details, I was conscious of Gerald's watch on my wrist, a tangible reminder of the responsibility that came with success. In helping Zoe develop her project, I was honoring his legacy in the most meaningful way possible by creating opportunity for the next generation of problem solvers. After Zoe left, practically floating with excitement, I called my father to tell him about the new mentorship initiative. He listened with interest, then surprised me with his response. "I would like to contribute to the foundation," he said. "Not just financially, though that too if needed, but with time. I have experience that might be valuable to these young entrepreneurs." "That would be wonderful," I told him, genuinely moved by the offer. "The students would benefit enormously from your business expertise. And I suspect I would benefit from their fresh perspectives," he replied. "Your dinner revelation did more than just surprise the family, Audrey. It made me reevaluate how I measure success, both in myself and others. I want to be part of building something that lasts beyond balance sheets and property portfolios." As we finalized plans for his involvement, I thought about how one evening, one moment of truth, had created ripples that continued to expand outward. My decision to live according to Gerald's philosophy had influenced not just my own life, but increasingly, the lives of those around me. Later that evening, as I rode the subway home, I studied the diverse faces of my fellow passengers: a construction worker still in his work clothes, a nurse in scrubs, students with backpacks, a woman in a business suit similar to my own. Each with their own story, their own measure of what mattered. Gerald had moved through the world this way, seeing people rather than positions, value rather than valuables. In my apartment that night, I took off the watch and held it in my palm, feeling its weight and significance. It had become far more than a timepiece to me. It was a compass, guiding my decisions and priorities. A reminder that true wealth lay not in what you possessed, but in what you contributed, not in how you were perceived, but in how you lived your values. The watch would never hang in a museum or be stored in a safe. It would continue to accompany me through board meetings and foundation events, through family dinners and quiet evenings. It would mark the hours of my life, as it had marked Gerald's, a witness to the creation of something meaningful and lasting. As I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with a message from Blake. He had just finished his first solo teaching session at the coding program and was exhilarated by the experience. "I think I finally understand what Gerald meant about impact over image," he wrote. Thank you for showing me a different way to measure success. I smiled as I replied, thinking about how authentic connections and genuine purpose were the true markers of a life well lived. The watch had caught my father's eye at that fateful dinner. But what truly mattered was the philosophy it represented, the understanding that our worth is not determined by our wealth, but by our actions and their impact on others. Have you ever had a moment when something you owned revealed more about you than you intended? Or a time when others' perceptions of you changed dramatically based on new information? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey of authentic success resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories about finding true value in a world obsessed with appearances. Remember that the most precious things we own are not measured by their price tags, but by the meaning they hold in our hearts. Thank you for listening, and until next time, take care.